Hello everyone, my name is Malcolm and I'm R&D manager at the NEO team. And some of you may already know a little bit about me if you've been active in the community. I'm quite active in Slack and I'm also reading everything on Reddit and answering a few questions there as well. And those who don't know anything about me, I'm very interested in consensus algorithms, on the governance models, NEO's vision of the smart economy, and also how we as a blockchain can achieve mass adoption. So if any of you are interested in these subjects, you can just reach out to me. You have my email here, and on Slack you can just write @LeeRider and I will get a ping and answer you just as soon as I can. So let's move on. There has been a lot of questions from the community about NEO and how it actually works. We have two tokens, and what are the difference between those two tokens and how are they used? What is a consensus node, and how does that affect the blockchain? So we also got feedback from other meetups here in Shanghai, but also from London, about these questions. So I thought it was good to have a presentation to explain to everybody how it actually works. So these are the questions. What is NEO and what is gas? What do we use them for? Why do we need to have two tokens? What is a consensus node? What benefits do consensus nodes get? And what benefits do other people who don't make it as a consensus node, what do they miss out on? So these are questions which I hope will be clearer after this presentation. To first understand why we have two tokens and how it's connected to consensus nodes, it's important to know what NEO actually is and the vision and what we set out to do. So NEO is not an altcoin, it's not a cryptocurrency, it's not meant to be used as a cryptocurrency. It is a platform for decentralized applications, and it is a platform for smart contracts, but it's not only that, it's much more than that. So what is it then? So NEO is smart economy. We see a future where the boundary between real assets and digitized assets is removed. So our goal is not to replace the economy or bring any option to the current economy, but what we actually want to do is to empower the current economy. We want to make it more efficient. And we also want to do it together. So this is not a few-man project, this is a global project with community members all over the world, working on together on what they see as a future of smart economy, and everybody can participate in it. And we also aim to remove obstacles that we have seen in other blockchain projects. So these obstacles are hindering us to actually reach mass adoption. And supporting multiple programming languages is of course a quite obvious obstacle in this sense. But it's not only that either. The whole NEO model is actually built to be able to achieve real-world mass adoption. So the NEO and the gas, what is the difference between the two? Why do we have two tokens, and how are they affected to the mass adoption? It's actually like this. NEO has two main purposes. The first purpose is that it slowly generates gas. And I want to emphasize that it is really slowly. One gas will only ever generate one gas. And it will do so during a period of 22 years. And in reality, in practice, since it's related to block time, it could be 23 or 24 years. So it's really slow. The main reason is to enforce network integrity. And there are two mechanisms that enforces the network integrity. The first one is voting for consensus nodes, and the other one is the circulation of gas. So how is circulation of gas has anything to do with the integrity of the network? I will also get to that later. Well, the gas token, it only has one utility. It's actually the utility token. So if you want to deploy anything on the NEO blockchain, let's say you want to deploy a smart contract or you want to register a system asset, the token you would use is gas. So that's a utility token. And the circulation works like there are system fees and there are transaction fees. So system fees are, for example, deployment of a smart contract. It is registering a system asset, and those will be distributed proportionally to all the NEO. That's part of the circulation. The other part of the circulation is the transaction costs. So consensus nodes, they can decide to charge a small transaction fee. And if they decide to do so, that transaction fee will be distributed only amongst the consensus nodes. So why do we have this separation? It's actually because we want to separate the concerns. We have seen in other blockchains that there is a conflict of interest between those who are actually using the blockchain and those who are upholding the integrity of the network. So if we move on. Part of separating the concerns is used through the consensus nodes. So as I mentioned, the NEO, they can vote for the consensus nodes, and consensus nodes will represent the interest of the network. So what they do is actually the ones who create or select the next block to come to an agreement which the next block should be. In NEO, there is no competition on creating blocks. It's not proof of work. It's not, there's no chain splits and competition to find the next blocks. That's not how it works in NEO. It's also no betting or staking on which block that has the highest probability of becoming the next block. So how it works is that there are a fewer number of consensus nodes which are selected by the NEO holders, and those will reach a consensus on the next block. And very basically, one of the consensus nodes will propose a block, and the other consensus nodes will send a response if they accept that block or if they want to change the view. And change the view is if they cannot agree with that block, then they suggest that another consensus node should instead propose his block. And there's no reward for your own block to be selected. So there's no incentive to change the view in any way. And those of you who paid attention, noticed me saying that the consensus node, they will get transaction fees. So the very common question that pops up then is, well, how do I become a consensus node? I want to collect all the transaction fees. And to break the news, the number of the consensus node is actually meant to be quite small. Small enough that it's not really reasonable for an average holder to expect to become a consensus node. And that may sound a bit strange to some of you. Well, that's not really fair, is it? That some of the big holders should just gain all the transaction fees for themselves? And that's not the way a decentralized system should work? Well, it's actually not the case. The reason that it is like this is also to separate concerns. So consensus nodes are not supposed to be driven by an economic motive. Well, they do get transactions fee, right? So there is an economic motive. Well, you also have to take into account how the whole model works. The NEO holders, those who are not consensus nodes, they have no interest in the transaction fees. In fact, the regular NEO holder, he does not want transaction fees, because the regular NEO holder, he will get his redistribution of gas from registering new smart contracts and from registering new system assets. So the NEO token, he wants to vote for as low transaction fees as possible. And the consensus nodes, well, if they decide that they want to have a higher transaction fee, then the NEO holders will simply vote for another consensus node. So what we get in the end is that the NEO holders, they will force the transaction fees to be as low as possible. And the barrier to become a consensus node is quite high. So if you realize that to become a consensus node, you need to first pay the nomination fee, which is 1,000 gas. And on top of that, you also need quite a large amount of NEO to be able to vote for yourself, to be voted in as the consensus node. And on top of this, you have to go through these barriers with the knowledge that once you become a consensus node, there will not be much of any economic reward for it. So who would then like to become a consensus node is the question. Well, those participants in the network that has an interest in upholding the integrity of the network, for them, they actually don't mind about the cost that it takes to run a consensus node. For them, it's more important to just uphold the integrity. So there are participants who are willing to be consensus nodes without economic incentives, even with losing money on it. They still have an interest in upholding the network. So I think this is separation of concern that is quite unique to NEO. The two-token system allows that one token is used only to uphold the integrity of the network, and the other token is used to utilize the network. So NEO holders will always have an incentive to keep transactions fees low, to zero or very close to zero. And consensus nodes with this knowledge will by nature be consensus nodes that have interest in upholding the integrity of the network and not having just pure economic motives. So these incentives are very transparent, and they're also very transparent to everybody who desires to use the blockchain platform. So as a developer, you will know that if you deploy your application on the NEO blockchain, you will know that the transaction fees will always, by the model itself, be kept as close to zero as it possibly can be. So the transaction fees and the gas utility fees are all meant to be collected from the individuals and companies who desire to launch applications on the NEO blockchain. So it's not meant to be collected from the end users. And this is also quite specific for NEO, that we want to be able to make it a seamless experience for end user. You have those who deploy the application on the blockchain, but you also have the users who use and call the smart contract. And for them, it should be experienced as a seamless experience. If it can't be free, it should at least experience as it would be free. And you can only achieve this by ensuring that the transaction fees are as low as it possibly can be. And I'm also very excited myself. I hope this can open up quite a few new business models, creative business models on how you can actually use the NEO blockchain when you know that the utility and the integrity tokens of the network are actually split.